Traveling the Vortex.
We've joined the Doctor as he travels the Vortex and arrive at episode 539, where there's a bunch of Tots killer Commandos. I'm Keith.
I'm Sean.
I'm Glenn.
How's it going, guys?
Good. How are you guys?
Not too bad.
How's everybody been doing? What have you been doing? Why have you been doing?
These Why?
Are questions. Yeah.
Why? Why is Gamora?
Yeah.
Did you guys do anything, watch anything this week? Have you guys got a chance to get out and see Ant-Man and the Wasp yet?
I did get out to see Ant-Man and the Wasp.
Yay, Sean?
Ooh, I did not.
Oh, no.
Oh.
Well, Keith, what did you think? Spoiler free, what did you think?
I thoroughly enjoyed it. I always enjoy Ant-Man movies more than I think I will.
Yeah, I agree.
From the get-go, the first one I enjoyed it more than I thought I would. None of them have ever been my favorites, but I like what they do, and I like that they do slightly different things. Yeah. And this was something else that was slightly different, and I really enjoyed. There's some stuff that I'm not sure. There's a character in it that I don't know how else they could have done, but I don't know if it was really a necessary thing to include.
Now I'm curious to know who you're talking about.
I don't want to spoil anything.
Okay, all right. We can talk about it off here.
Yeah, and I think what was really cool about it was the quantum realm and the world they built down there, and I kind of wish we could have explored it a little bit more than we got to. Yeah,
it's pretty wacky.
And it was an interesting wacky because it was a resistance movement and et cetera, and I was fascinated by it and wanted to learn more, and it was a little disappointed we didn't get as much of it. But other than a couple of small things like that, I thoroughly enjoyed the film.
Yeah, I think it's getting. I don't think it's getting hate because I don't think anybody hates it, but the critics panned it, but it still has a pretty good audience score. And I think the critics are. I don't want to say this because then it sounds like I'm leaning into the discussion of what it is, but I think that the honeymoon's over for the critics as far as Marvel goes. Mm-hmm. I think that they feel like the movies are being made for fans now, and so they're being a little more critical than maybe they could be, because I think that a lot of them kind of nitpicked on things in this film that didn't need to be nitpicked because it's just a fun movie. I mean, it is setting up our big bad for presumably the run of the rest of the multiverse saga, but I think that they're giving it some undue hate, or at least some undue negative critiques that I don't think are necessarily levied against this film. Fairly levied against this film.
And I do have to say that post Infinity Saga, my excitement level for Marvel movies is dropped considerably.
Well, yeah,
I'm just not. There's just not as. I don't know if it's lost a bit of magic to it, or just we hit the height that I thought we were going to hit, and I don't see how we can reach it again. I don't know.
That's just it. The last two Avengers films set the bar so high that everything else has been, paled in comparison so far. So,
and for the most part, the returning characters have been fairly solid entries. Ant-Man, I think, is considered a fairly solid entry also.
Yeah.
And then there have been a couple of new introductions that have been exciting and fun to watch, but that's mostly just been on television, not at the movie theater. So I don't know. And the other thing I could complain about it is it straddled the line a little too much. Maybe it should have been wackier and a bit stranger, and a bit more out there instead of trying to kind of appease both worlds.
That's a good point. I would agree with that. I think it could have got a little wackier too. Yeah,
I like talking out the side of my mouth since I haven't seen it yet, but I think a lot of it. I totally agree with you, Keith. I can't say that I'm not excited. I mean, obviously, I'm gonna go see the new Marvel movie, but
it's 2 weeks out and you haven't gone to see it.
Yeah,
you would have been there regardless of your cruise. You would have found a way to see the movie the opening weekend.
Exactly. I think it's just Marvel fatigue at this point. I think between all of the new products that are coming on Disney Plus and all the stuff that post-snap depression maybe is a good way to look at it. But so far, I mean, I've enjoyed the films in Phase 4, but I haven't really been knocked through the back wall of the theater by the films in Phase 4.
Well, and really, we haven't gotten...
with a handful of exceptions.
We haven't gotten a lot of quote-unquote films in Phase 4. We got a lot of television, and I think even Kevin Feige realized that they maybe needed to slow the roll on the Disney Plus stuff because, we got a lot of content. I think what it felt like was when there wasn't a TV show on, there was a movie in theaters, and when there wasn't a movie in theaters, there was a TV show on. And I think that there was no time to kind of breathe between those and build up some anticipation for the next project. And I think Kevin Feige knows that, because you'll notice we haven't got a date for Secret Invasion, and they've kind of put we haven't even gotten a date for Agatha Covenant of Chaos, which now I think they've pushed out a year. I think it starts next year. I think the next thing after that was what was the next project that we were supposed to get that was in the besides the second season of, we know definitely is coming, the second season of What If, for sure.
And Loki.
And Loki, that's it. And then Loki season 2. I bet we only get those 3 shows this year, because I think they're going to slow down on that output. So, which I think will be good.
Yeah.
Well, and especially when we've gotten, these great TV shows that give us time to explore all sorts of different avenues that we don't get to explore in the movies, it makes me a little less excited to get the cliff notes in the movies.
Yeah.
When I can get a deeper, more enriching story on television and not have to pay a larger amount of money for a one-time viewing.
Yeah.
I talked a little bit about this on the blog of Eternal Stench, where it's interesting from the standpoint that in some ways the pandemic hitting when it did was the perfect breather for us. Because
I think it was a little too much, but yeah.
Well, I mean, I can't imagine marching right back into the theater for the next post-snap film.
Well, sure.
Going to see Black Widow right away afterwards.
Yeah.
And that was still a misfire, because it's a good movie.
It
should have come out way sooner.
Yeah.
But it also had the double-edged sword of, because of the pandemic and then everything, let's go streaming and let's really focus on the TV end of things to, entertain people while we're at home. Don't get me wrong, very grateful for that there was new content coming, but at the same time it just became and then especially if, as a Disney Plus fan, if you are both a Star Wars person and a Marvel person, then it's constantly there's a new show on. Oh, Bad Batch is on. Oh, this is on. Oh, we're getting a new episode of that. Or, and I'm behind on those too. I still haven't watched.
Me too. I'm such a bad Star Wars fan.
Even though everybody tells me, how fantastic it is. So
I am such a bad Star Wars fan. I'm behind on Bad Batch and Andor, and I feel guilty, but
there's only so much time in the day.
Batch, fortunately, but I still haven't even started Andor.
See, I would watch Andor over Bad Batch any day.
Yeah.
And then I had another friend tell me
Bad Batch is also easier because it's a half hour.
I had another friend tell me today that I need to just go ahead and don't bother trying to play catch up with Picard and just jump in on season 3. Because it's that good, and you can go back and watch the 2 bad prequel seasons later.
Right. I've heard the same thing, that the first 2 are just not even worth watching, but the 3rd season, it sounds like they finally got it right.
Well, wait till they finish it, because I enjoyed season 1 thoroughly until the end. So,
well, did you guys watch anything else? We didn't do much. We've been playing a lot of Catan, which
nice.
Yeah, that's become one of our new favorite games. And then Holly ordered another one called Mysterium, but we haven't played it yet. It's a few years old, but we heard it's really good.
The other thing I did was I have now finished reading all of the Miss Peregrine's Peculiar books.
Oh, really?
I thoroughly enjoyed the saga of the 6 books. There's 2 ancillary books, one of which is really enjoyable. The other which is, I don't know if I'd recommend anybody really reading it because it's pointless.
Unnecessary.
Unfortunately, it's the most recent one. Yeah, it's a neat idea. It's, Miss Peregrine writing a book of how to live in the peculiar world, but it's like, it's, I guess, after directly on the heels of the final book, it feels unnecessary. Maybe if it had been the couple of years between release dates, I would feel differently. But the series itself, I thoroughly enjoyed. I read the last 3 back to back to back.
Wow.
And they all kind of started to blur together what happened in what book, because I was just consuming it that quickly.
I picked up the audiobook of Ready Player 2 at the library, and I'm probably a fourth of the way through that at the moment.
It was better than I expected it to be.
It's starting to pick up. I was a little concerned over some of the decisions that Wade is making in the early chapters. He does not come across as the nicest individual in the world. But we're actually into the quest part of it has just really started, and it's starting to, okay, this is kind of what I was missing, is more of this and less of the other. And then Mel and I really just kind of been playing, trying to play catch up on our Oscar movies before going into. We have to get our picks in this weekend for the Pod versus Pod Oscar Challenge that we are participating in again. So we watched Marcel the Shell with Shoes On, which finishes off our animated run. It was cute, not great. We tried to watch Tar, and I feel genuinely bad about this. I think if you have a background in music, you will probably really appreciate this film. I think if you don't have an appreciation in music, it's very high-minded and pretentious and kind of talks down to you because you don't have that. And it's very smug. And admittedly, as the story progresses, it's supposed to be. Mm. And Cate Blanchett is great, but neither one of us could find ourselves caring enough to continue with it. We actually turned it off about an hour and 10 minutes in. And we were just like, you know. And then I went and looked at Wiki to find out what happens. I was like, yeah, I didn't see any of that. There's a trail of breadcrumbs there that I guess would lead you to that. But again, it's done in such a haughty way that it was just kind of like, it was very off-putting. Oh. Also off-putting, but in a completely different way, we watched Woman Talking. And wow, this is a very intense movie topic that is both heart-sickening and it's a rough one to watch, but it's a very good talkie drama. And we watched Amsterdam, which is not nominated for anything, but it was kind of been on our list for a long time since it came out, and I don't know why people don't like that one. we had we caught it on the plane, actually, caught most of it on the plane coming back, and so we had to watch it again when we got home to kind of pick up a few things that, you know, plane noises and turbulence and stuff we missed out on. But right. It's just an enjoyable flick. Huh. Critics are nuts.
They are sometimes.
So yeah, been doing a lot of that.
Anything else?
Keith, did you make it over to the con?
I did not.
Just real briefly, I think we should throw out that we had our Great Overland Comic Con here in Topeka.
Great Overland Station Comic Con.
Great Overland Station Comic Con. Thank you. This past weekend, which is a little local con here in Topeka that has been started up and had a pretty decent little get-go for their first go-around.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I thought it's a neat little venue, but I think it's almost too small for what they were trying to do. Although, as we talked about a little bit, doing the sort of the off-site stuff that related to, you know, the bookstore had authors and so on and so on. I think if you were able to get to the off-site stuff, I think maybe that made it feel a little bigger, but unfortunately it wasn't advertised well enough, and so we didn't really get to any of the off-site stuff, so we kind of did everything there at the station. But it was a good little show.
And it is a little bit of a walk over to Noto from the station.
Yeah, absolutely, because there's not a real direct route, because you got to go down, then across the tracks, and then over into the Noto district. So
it's about, what, 2 blocks?
3 probably. To get to
3 by the time you put that turn in there.
Yeah, exactly. But you know, they had.
If only we had the Topeka trolley.
A lot of dealers. They had a little area for panels in the one room. There was a gaming room where they were doing One Life fundraiser, and then upstairs they had the artist alley, and yeah, it's a well put together little con that I think could grow. And
I understand you saw but didn't really see Red Dalek.
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to say anything to Eric, but yeah, Red Dalek was there, and he was he was down on the main floor, of course, and then up above you can kind of look over. It's kind of a little mezzanine that you can look over into the rest of the floor of the station, and that's where the artist alley were. And there was a bunch of us sitting up there looking over the rail, and he looked up and he said, the stairs may be a challenge for me now, but you have to come down sometime. So that was kind of funny. He was getting into
nice.
So good show.
Well, I'm glad it was well attended and well organized.
Yeah. My other little thing that I did this week is going to be part of a new segment that we are starting called Something New 2-Minute Review. What we're going to do is we're going to, each of us, maybe not every week, but each of us are going to take turns picking something that's new in the Doctor Who universe and doing a quick little 2-minute review. Now, we'll be confined to 2 minutes. If we go a little over, it's not a big deal, but we are going to set a timer and try to get it all within 2 minutes. And
spoiler free.
And it'll be spoiler free, correct? Because we don't want to, one of us has listened to it or read it or watched it. We don't want to ruin it for the other guys. We don't certainly want to ruin it for people at home that we're surprising you with this. So, but I'm going to do a 2-minute review of All of Time and Space, which is the new 11th Doctor Chronicles. Now, I'm only doing the first story so that I can get it into 2 minutes, and then I will probably review the other parts of the box set as we go along with this. So, all right, I'm going to start the timer, and I'm going to do like we do and start with the publisher's summary, just to give some taste of what's coming. So here we go, starting the clock now. And All in Time and Space, which is actually the title of the box set and the first story in this box set. And the publisher's summary is, as concepts go, it's a good one. An adventurer and his friend traveling through all of time and space, righting wrongs and defending those who can't defend themselves. Yet, as its creator is about to discover, there are those who rather this show never existed. What's so dangerous about Doctor Who? Okay, so this is a cool, clever little story that does some really meta things. The main protagonist is a writer called Ellery Quest, and he's pitching a stage play. And what he describes is pretty much the actual and general plot of Doctor Who, and it's even called Doctor Who. The Doctor's and companion Valerie are now attempting to make contact with Ellery because they want to be able to help him, and they have a warning for him. And they use storytelling mediums in order to make contact with. So at one point they use a radio. At one point they use, and this sounds really weird, but they become Punch and Judy-like puppets. And at one point, they even are communicating to him as a comic strip character in a comic strip in a newspaper. They're limited to these because this whole story takes place in the 1950s. But I can't really give much more away without giving the plot. But I can say that the story turns in on itself, and there are elements that bring to mind the Mind Robber, if there's a little bit of a hint there in the Second Doctor's era. Jacob Dudman's 11th Doctor is spot on, and at times I just fell into it, and I was listening to Matt Smith. He's so good. And of course, we've listened to him do Top of the Tree with young Kazran Sardik from Christmas Carol, and then he also read for Mind of Magnos. So you guys are all with Time Lord Victoria, so you guys are familiar with him. But he does such a spot-on job. And then the new companion, Valerie Lockwood, who's played by Sophia Ingar. She's a joy to listen to, and although I said new companion, I do think she joined the Doctor in the last box set, and there's my alarm going off. So overall, I highly recommend this audio, and I'm looking forward to continuing the box set. So there you go. There's my something new 2-minute review.
Something new 2-minute review, brought to you by insert your business name here. Contact Traveling the Vortex for more information.
He's only half joking.
Only half.
Only half.
Actually, no, he's not even joking.
A segment of Traveling the Vortex, please contact us.
You are invited on an adventure across all of time and space. In a completely random order. It's the Police Box in the Junkyard podcast. Jump in the TARDIS with your hosts,
Eric Gulbranson,
Asad Kheshki,
and
Matthew Kressel.
Explore Doctor Who TV stories, audio adventures, and books, both novels and non-fiction. The Police Box in the Junkyard podcast. It's the entire Whoniverse. On shuffle. The Police Box in the Junkyard podcast is a member of the Direction Point Network and is available about once a month wherever you find your podcasts. You are listening to Traveling the Vortex.
Hello, fellow time travelers, and welcome to the Doctor Who Target Book Club podcast, the only podcast to discuss, in story order, all the Doctor Who novelizations. My name is Tony Whitt, and every 2 weeks or so, I'm joined by a 2 to 3 person discussion panel, including our so-called expert who's been a Who fan since 1979. That would be me. We also get the views of intermediate, casual, and novice fans who either have never seen the show or who have never read these books until these podcasts, including
Dalton Hughes
and
Allison Seyfried.
You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you find good podcasts, or even ones like ours. You're listening to Traveling the Vortex, a Direction Point podcast.
All right, well, let's move on to this week's full-length review. What are we doing this week? I forgot.
The War Doctor Begins, Forged in Fire.
From Big Finish Productions, Doctor Who, The War Doctor Begins, Volume 1.
I assumed you were here to help. That you were on our side.
Oh, sides. It always has to be about sides, doesn't it?
Doctor of War, make your choice.
We're too close to falter now! Prepare explosives!
You try my patience.
You try mine!
What are they going to do?
What you have forced them to.
What are they going to do?
You may think you're being very clever, but what you're doing risks tearing apart the fabric of space and time. There are more things in heaven and earth, Rasmus. Or should I say Khan and Gallifrey? I can't see how one Time Lord makes a difference.
You will find a way. The renegade, the warrior.
Open the time chamber. You want to know what is behind the wall. You will have your answer. It doesn't look very hospitable. Enter.
Big Finish. We love stories.
The Doctor is no more, in his place a warrior, finally joining the Time War between the Daleks and the Time Lords. But how far will he go to end this conflict? What lines will he cross? How much of himself will he sacrifice? The War Doctor is only just beginning to find out who he is. Light the flame. The Sisterhood of Karn have a guest, recovering from his traumatic regeneration. To do what is asked of him, the Doctor has rejected his name and code. The Time Lords have plans for him and for Karn. Is he ready to light the flame of war?
Bum, bum, bum.
Yep, I think it deserves an even bigger bum, bum, bum than that.
This is a great introduction for the War Doctor.
Yeah.
It was a great introduction for the War Doctor.
And what's amazing about it is it literally picks up right after Night of the Doctor. I mean, he's still on Karn. He's still recovering from taking the elixir and changing, his appearance, and
Cass's body hasn't even been buried yet.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, it's absolutely phenomenal. The exploration of the Doctor as he's post-regeneration and his dealings with the Sisterhood of Karn. The fact that Cardinal Erasmus has basically come to collect him and was, along with this other commander that was on a mission that he didn't really know about and is basically tasked by the president to take the eternal flame out of Karn in order to keep it safe. Of course Rassilon would try to do that. That makes total sense. Right. And then, of course, throw this commander under the bus when it goes wrong.
Right.
I mean, there's
which was also satisfying.
Oh, yeah, because she was just a piece of work. I have no complaints about the story at all. I absolutely enjoyed the entire story and all the characterizations. I would say Ohila didn't quite sound right. Of course, it wasn't the same actress, so that explains that. But sometimes it felt like I don't know if it's a reflection of Louise Jameson directing it, but sometimes it felt like I could hear Leela in some of the characters.
I thought the exact same thing.
Okay, good. I'm not alone.
And I wondered that too, because I listened to it and then I listened to the behind the scenes, and I did not realize until I listened to the behind the scenes that it was Louise Jameson even that was directing.
Yeah, neither did I.
So I don't think I even projected that. I thought maybe there was some influence there, but I thought the same thing, especially Ohelia and especially
what's her face?
Lithia.
Yes, Lithia.
Very much both had that Louise Jameson Leela quality to them. And I wasn't sure if that was intentional or if it was not. But I too agree. I wish that, and I can't remember the actress's name that played Ohelia in the main stories, but I had sort of wished to come back. I think this gal was passable, and there's not a whole lot of her. I mean, there's a good balance of her, but not enough that it takes me out of the story that the voice is a bit different. But Jonathan Carley as the young version of the War Doctor, and I'm going to say young version of the War Doctor because he is such a good John Hurt sound-alike. And that this guy, he's amazing that he's able to do this. Now, the reason I say young War Doctor is because, and I think it's intentional from listening to the behind the scenes, listening to them talk, but he has a younger twist to the voice. And at first I wondered if that was because he is a younger guy and maybe he wasn't quite into the edge of William Hurt's voice. But the more that I listened to the behind the scenes, I kind of wondered if maybe this was intentional. And it sounds like Louise Jameson did a lot, because it doesn't sound like this guy was primarily an actor before he took this role. And she's worked with him a bit. And I think maybe that was a choice that they took. And I think it was a right choice because he sounds younger, more enthusiastic, and more jubilant. And I think that works for the War Doctor who's getting ready, who's setting off to war. He's taken on this warrior persona and he's about to go headlong into it. And I think that energy is there, whereas, and we've listened to one and reviewed one, but we'll find later on that when we listen to the ones that John Hurt did, he feels more weathered and more war-worn. And I think that suits those stories as well. So I'm kind of glad they've taken this approach with this one, because I really think it's going to bridge this era from starting from this and then moving into, the end and closer to Day of the Doctor.
I would agree 100%.
An amazing amount of tap dancing going on in this story. We tap dance between the Doctor and Cardinal Rathmus, and they're kind of not exactly friendship, begrudging respect, maybe. they're not at odds. I think they've reached a point in their relationship where they're okay being in the same room together.
Right.
And then very much not with Tamasan later. We've reached. There's a lot of tap dancing between these two slices of the Doctor's persona. That for all of the lore that has suddenly sprouted about the War Doctor and the horrible things that he did in the name of peace and justice in the galaxy, but not in the name of the Doctor. And we're kind of painted a picture. And I remember saying after the 50th how much John Hurt shocked and delighted me, because I was prepared for him to be grumpy, and he wasn't. He was still the Doctor. He was still quite witty and charming, partially because he's John Hurt, but partially because they didn't want to completely, put the edge on him.
Yeah.
And so coming into it, I was once again prepared for a little more vicious of an attack dog kind of Doctor.
Yeah.
And we didn't. We kind of tap danced around that, where he is still finding, for being the warrior, nonviolent ways of handling things. And that was really intriguing and fun to listen to as the box set went on. That it wasn't always. I mean, while we start and he's rummaging through the scrapyard on Karn looking for guns, and making the comment about he's far too familiar with all the weaponry, and yet still holding true to the Doctor's ideals where he's not exactly using it. So that was I felt a very well done. And then the Rassilon, you know what we're going to do? We're going to take the heart of your planet. Wow, you would have made a good Dalek. I'm pretty sure we've heard this before.
Mm-hmm.
I loved the tap dancing that they did around Karn itself, where you guys know me. I like my science and my Doctor Who, and I'm not a big fan necessarily of the mysticism that arises from things. And Karn is all about mysticism.
Right,
Karn is all about the spirituality and the, elemental forces at work. And they very neatly wove a path between those two sides where, well, yes, there's a scientific explanation of this, but then the torch fails. And we're just kind of left with, well, Karn abides, man. They're going to... the planet's going to do what it's going to do, and it may not want you to do that. And yet, it was just enough that it wasn't hammered over the head with it, but at the same time, it was very much there. So I thought they just did a top to bottom a phenomenal job with that.
Yeah.
And then there's Jonathan Carley, who, wow, just I wasn't convinced I wasn't listening to John Hurt through the whole thing from the get-go. I had to keep reminding myself this wasn't him, even though he was projecting a younger version, which, as you said, Glenn, it was absolutely the right decision to give him that youthful exuberance and energy, and yet it still sounds like John Hurt.
Yeah,
just an incredible performance. So yeah, there's not very little I think that could be said negatively about this story. It was so well done.
Back to the balance they strike with the Sisterhood and Karn and Gallifrey, I like that it continues to further explore that that difference and that budding of styles and their history, because the Sisterhood of Karn, as we learned from Brain and Morbius and even some more in depth in some of the books, that's what Gallifrey was. They were the spiritual leaders on Gallifrey before they were, cast out politically and then, exiled by Rassilon. And so this kind of it doesn't go, it's not a full exploration, but it goes further to kind of expand that and explore that a little bit too. And I'm with you. I kind of like the balance that it strikes between the technological and the spiritual aspects of both sides of that.
And it's something very Rassilon for him to, okay, I'm back in power. Hey, I still have a grudge against these people.
Right.
let's clean up a few loose ends.
They still have something that he wants. So
yeah,
and even if it's not a grudge, it's still a slightly pragmatic, albeit egotistical thing to go, oh, that's something we can't let fall in the Daleks' hands. We got to get that under our house.
Right, right.
I can totally see why Rassilon would decide to do this sort of thing without caring what happened to the Sisterhood of Karn.
Oh, I there's no doubt in my mind he knew what would happen.
He knew what would happen. He just doesn't care.
From Rassilon, from Rassilon's point of view, that's a lucky strike bonus.
Right.
Yeah.
We're doing this for the good of the colony. And the fact that you're not going to survive, well, darn.
Oh well.
Sucks to be you.
And it makes me like Rasmus more that he didn't really know what was going on and really chose the Doctor's side in the whole situation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Using the time lock to protect Karn and all that stuff.
Well, let's move on to the next one.
Lionhearts. Seeking out Gallifrey's new warrior, Commodore Tamazan finds that the War Doctor has invited himself on a secret mission. The time-sensitive Tharls are in danger, and an old friend of the Doctor's is trapped. But Birak knows better than to trust either side in this war.
Bum, bum, bum. I'll say it. I really liked this story.
So I have a confession.
I think I'm probably going to confess the same thing. Go ahead.
I didn't realize that the Tharls or Birak were the people from Warrior's Gate until I listened to the behind-the-scenes stuff.
So it didn't take me that long. However, I went a good probably 20 minutes into this thinking they were saying the Thralls.
Yep.
And I was like, wow, the Thralls? That's like the from the Daleks? What? Wait a minute. And it wasn't until I think it's even when they encounter Birak, that wasn't until I realized, oh, they're saying Tharls, because then they sort of that lion theming came about, and I thought, oh, this is who this is. And so it did hit me quite a bit sooner in this story of who they were. But yeah, I admittedly, even for the first probably 20 minutes of this thing, was going, Thals? Are they talking about Thals or Tharls? Anyway, so
exactly the same. It wasn't until they encounter Birak and they make the lion description and I don't remember the line, but when the doctor says something about, oh, he's a friend of mine, and they specifically, I don't remember if it was E-Space, but they specifically dropped something related to that episode. And that's when it finally clicked. And I was like, oh,
yeah,
wow, that's an old school reference, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, of all of the episodes to go back and pull from, Warriors Gate? Okay. So.
Well, and they mentioned that the I guess cell that they're keeping them in is reinforced with Thor-Star alloy so that they, because they can pass through virtually anything except for this substance. And so that was one of those callbacks to that as well. Yeah. Warriors Gate.
But I have to say the story is good enough that retrospectively, the fact that it's Thralls and Birok elevates it, but as I listened to it, I still enjoyed it and thought it was really, really good.
Yeah, yeah.
Although it was totally a good story.
It doesn't necessarily need the connection to those throwbacks in order for it to be a good story. Yeah.
Yeah. Although I do think that the end reveal I'm torn on. I like the fact that the Doctor didn't actually kill them, but in the same time, this is the War Doctor, and kind of like Sean talked about when he was talking about when we first saw John Hurt and the War Doctor and we heard about all the terrible things he had done. As this was going, I was like, oh, this is one of those terrible things. He killed all of these, this whole group of people, and this basically almost committed genocide, but because of not just out of to have it done, but to put them out of their misery.
Well, it was out of
to
honor
save them
and
from
compassion.
Something worse.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So he did something horrible out of honor and compassion, and then they kind of undo that. So it felt just like something the Doctor would normally do. It didn't feel like it was anything more that the War Doctor would have done to cross a line.
Well,
and I felt like it was moving towards that direction, and then they backed off of it. I was a little disappointed in that.
Well,
aspect.
let me put some perspective on this, because I think what we're missing here, because we don't have a lot of stories of the War Doctor. All we have is the reputation that precedes him.
Well,
and
this is true.
I think that's what they might be able to mold this Doctor into, is he has this reputation for all these bad things that he did. And he even has the guilt for probably stepping up so close to having to do some of these things. And that's why he's weathered by this being, this warrior. And I don't think he has any sort of, remorse or what am I looking for? Any ethics about killing Daleks, for sure.
No,
definitely not. I think that maybe his reputation precedes him a little more. And then we are making him out to have made worse decisions than maybe he does. That was one of the things that I thought about this. And Sean had said on the last review about how the Doctor's still looking for peaceful ways to resolve things. And I thought the same thing in that first story. I thought, oh, wow, he hasn't really gone headlong into this warrior thing yet. He hasn't embraced it like maybe I expected, because I did the same thing, Keith. I thought, we hear so many of these bad things that he did, and part of the reason why he, disowned the name the Doctor. And so in this one, when that happens, I fell hook, line, and sinker for it. I thought, oh, wow, okay, so, how do I forgive this guy for doing something that's very undoctor-like? But it was presented in such a way that, it seemed like the honorable thing to do for them and a compassionate thing to do for them. And so
it was either that or leave them behind to be tortured and then killed.
So that twist at the end, which I think the exposition of it was dragged out a little bit more. I don't think we needed to I don't think they needed to handhold us in the reminders of how things played out. I think that was maybe a little heavy-handed. I think I figured it out. I understood it. It just needed a few, this, and this happened. But when that unraveled, I kind of thought, oh, wow, okay, that was a very clever reveal, because he still is that Doctor that's going to find the alternate, even if he's not going by the name of the Doctor, he's still going to try to find that other way out of a situation, the higher road, or the better way to do something, or the peaceful way to do something.
And they did allude to that reputation aspect of it, and the fact that, Tamazan now thinks that he did kill them all, even though he didn't actually do it.
Right.
And I guess, we heard about it all, but I know the Doctor himself, post this regeneration, doesn't remember how he resolved it. He just knows that he resolved it and everybody's gone.
Right.
But it feels like there is more weight there than just that. And while, yes, he's fighting Daleks and he's in the war that he didn't want to be a part of, doing things like this where he finds the doctorly way to get out of it feels still like it's not like him doing the horrific things that he needs to shame himself for doing. Well, it feels like he's still being the 8th Doctor in the War Doctor story.
But it's early on too, so
it is early on too. So I guess my point is I hope that they do cross that line at some point in the future where he does something that he would not forgive himself for, but we could see why he would do it the way he did it, and we would be able to forgive him.
Well, to be frank, the first story of that actual John Hurt set, I can't remember exactly what it was. I mean, he does
only
do
the
some
monstrous.
Yeah, only the monstrous. He does do some things that are very, very undoctor-like in that one, and so I think by that time, I think, and those, if I remember right, some of those, even those stories are, less warlike and more Doctor-like that we're going to hear. But I think there are some things in there that he makes decisions that I think, okay, that's very much along the lines of the War Doctor, which we'll get to, when we get there later on too.
Yeah.
Now, this has been just far enough back for me that I'm struggling to remember all of the finer details of it. I kind of remember the broad strokes of it. Is this the story where he had kind of a one-off companion?
Yeah, Barrock's sister. I can't remember her name.
Lorinus.
Yeah, Lorinus.
This is the one that I thought it was Lou Jameson.
As the one-off companion?
As the one-off companion, because she very much came across almost as a carbon copy of Leela.
Oh, she has
early
that.
Leela.
Yeah, she has
had
kind
the
of
warrior,
that.
The Huntus.
She has that primitive. She has that kind of primitive speak, the way that that Leela does. Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah,
as well.
and that was another thing that it kept taking me out of the story a little bit because my brain kept trying to reconcile. And I think that's one of the reasons I missed the Thralls or Tharals, because I was so focused on that part of it that then when I finally got over no, that's not her. This is a completely different character. They're not doing it. It seems like she's patterned after Leela. And then they hit me with the Warrior's Gate, and I went, "Oh."
Well, it's funny because
there was kind of just a double callback. But then, like you, when I listened to the behind the scenes stuff at the end, all of a sudden I was like, "Oh, she was involved, just not in the way I thought."
Well, it's funny because the way that when you were talking about that first story, very much. As though those gals were, and I think those gals, I don't think that they were even so much Leela-ish as those gals. I equated it to Louise Jameson's interview voice, and so you kept saying Leela, and I kept thinking, oh, okay, they didn't have that primitive sound that she puts forward, but they had that really kind of that timid. Slow, kind of deliberate cadence. And so that's what I thought you meant in that first story. And so I thought Ohila and the other gal were very much that type of person. So that's what I thought you meant. So in this particular story...
Oh, yeah, no. In this one in particular.
And see, in this particular story, no shades of Leela for me. So. All right, well, let's move on to the next one.
The Shadow Squad. Tamazan is unconvinced of the War Doctor's loyalties, though when their paths collide, both agree that the destruction of the Dalek time strategist could be the best route to victory. But on Etheria, the Daleks may have found a way to annihilate all plans to defeat them before they even begin.
We got to come up with a different thing. Every time he does that, he clips out the mic and we can't hear him.
You don't even hear the last bump.
No,
unless there wasn't the last bump.
I'll take it from the clapping out the mic that Sean liked it.
I liked it.
Yeah, I like this one too.
I did too.
The ideas behind this are just so. This is what I want from a time war story.
Yeah,
this is exactly the sort of thing I've been wanting to hear.
It's got some fantastic ideas, and even more exciting, they are well executed.
Yeah,
Just from top to bottom, the whole concept of this is fantastic, but it's carried through with a measure of rational logic to it that everything fits, everything works, everything makes sense, and the performances, which I assume again it's Nicholas Briggs's everybody that's in a Dalek casing.
Yes.
His time strategist has always scared me because he's such a low register rumble that you just it really does give me the shivers when I'm in the car listening to this, and then the thing starts up and it's talking. It's like, ugh. This is just like evil incarnate. And then he kind of one-ups himself with this what was it called, the Time Annihilator?
He was the Eradicator, Time Eradicator.
Time Eradicator.
What a great name for a Dalek. Time Eradicator. But the almost lighthearted, slightly insane sounding Dalek Khan vibe.
Yeah, that's exactly what I had, was the Dalek Khan vibe.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Which makes me wonder maybe if when the Doctor sends him spiraling off through the vortex at the end, if that maybe is going to play into it, that this is the origin of Dalek Khan. We just didn't know it yet. I
don't think so, because Dalek Khan had its own backstory that wasn't that this wasn't part of it anyway. So
yeah, but all they said with Dalek Khan was that he was in a battle and lost his shielding, got thrown back into the time vortex, and was buffeted by the time, which is what gave him this ability.
Well, yeah, but he was the attack leader of the what were they, the 13th Assault Group? Is that what they called him? The Coldescaro. He was chosen to be part of Coldescaro. I didn't get the impression that there was this step in between that and him going crazy. He basically went crazy because he flew through the basically the time lock and to rescue Davros. So yeah, I didn't get the impression that they were one and the same or connected in any way. But I agree that he very much had Dalek Khan vibes for the most part.
But yeah, that's what honestly almost I think maybe made him scarier, because there was a level of, I don't want to say nice, but
there was a level of transcendence to him.
Yes, transcendence, a level of civility.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
that was scary.
He's almost toying with the Doctor. He's almost playing with the Doctor here, and that's what makes him even creepier.
Creepy is a good word, because that's just what he came across. I mean, he just has this and it was such an interesting contradiction between the two, because like I said, the Daleks and the Emperor is very big and bombastic and loud, and the Dalek strategist is on the other end, where it's so low of a rumble to him that he doesn't have quite the same gravitas that the Emperor has size-wise, but yet you still are more afraid of him because of the way that he presents himself. And this thing's just kind of out there doing its own thing, and that to me is almost worse, because it's not grounded in a typical Dalek sound.
Yeah.
It was just that floored me more than anything else.
I would agree, and I think the time strategist, I think he was creepy in a way because while he was a lot more timid than, say, most of the even the regular Daleks, but certainly more so than the Emperor, but he always had sort of this cold, calculating tone to him, and which makes sense. I mean, the guy's a strategist; he's thinking ahead, and so I've always thought that was creepy, but this, because of that vibe that this one gives off, where he's kind of just callously playing with the Doctor and playing with this idea of, I have a one-up on you no matter what you do. That made him even more creepy.
Yeah.
The revelation that this weapon that they're looking for, I did not see that coming, that the weapon was a Dalek. I thought that was a neat reveal, especially since the weapon gets to reveal itself. That was kind of neat. The concept of the Time Lords being smart enough,
catching wind of this plan of the Daleks, and going back and planting a whole squad to grow up from infancy.
This is a sleeper cell that is. I mean, it's not even a sleeper cell. It's a, what would you say? It's a just this covert cell that the time strategist and the Eradicator cannot see. And it was so clever. I loved it. I thought it was such a great idea to have this squad. I like that it sets up with the one timeline where the guy who, the Eradicator finds this guy, and they go and take him out of time, and that's how they set this whole thing up. And I thought, where are they going to go with that? And then to loop and bookend that back at the end, where when those guys don't exist anymore in that form, but this guy has come another way around in this new reality, and he has a family and all the things that these kids basically didn't get. And the Eradicator timeline, I thought that was really neat to kind of fold that over and bookend it that way.
Yeah, it really was.
It's another example of one of the, closed loop paradoxes that we get so often in Doctor Who, but done so well.
Yeah.
Yeah, really, really, really liked this story.
And having the War Doctor and Tamazan together for a full story was just a delight to hear them banter.
Yeah, it really was.
Bicker, I guess, is the better word.
Anybody else internally screaming when she sets off to do the thing? It's like, stay in the house, Carl.
Tamazan has a kind of Illustra vibes to her. She's not quite Illustra. She doesn't have that same callous edge to her that Illustra does, but they're very, very similar characters.
Well, I get the impression that, she had studied under the desk of Illustra.
Yeah, absolutely.
She's definitely one of the ones that Illustra's grooming.
Right.
Yeah. I want to be you when I grow up.
Yeah, pretty much.
Absolutely. Yeah, this story it's so well done. It's so well put together. And while it's another one of these ones, and I think I said this about one of the Eighth Doctor stories that we reviewed last time, but it's a story that's complex, but is delivered in simple enough terms that it doesn't get mired in its own complexity. And so I think that, it kind of has sort of those high-minded ideas, those wacky, connecting with different temporal timelines and things like that could end up, an author could make that really confusing and then just kind of use some psychobabble to get around it. This doesn't do that at all. It really kind of simplifies that concept and that idea so that the delivery of that is very straightforward.
And this was written by the guy who wrote Full Circle.
Oh, is that right? Oh,
yeah. Huh. Believe it or not.
Oh, there you go. Interesting. Well, he's come a long way. I was just say he's really polished his writing style, hasn't he? Was Full Circle? That's the first East Base one.
That's the first Adric story, right?
So that's the guy that actually was. He was like, wasn't he like 17 or something when he wrote that?
Yeah,
he was like super young. Yeah,
he's definitely grown into his abilities.
He definitely has. Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's great. He has come a long way. Now, to be fair, Full Circle had some really good concepts. I don't know that the delivery was as good, but it conceptually had some good ideas.
It was the execution, I think, that fell short on Full Circle.
I would agree. Anyway, just a really solid box set. I think this box set builds on itself from story 1 to story 3. It really kind of crescendos into this really kind of really big, epic, intriguing story at the end. And so the structure of this, a lot of times I think we feel like we have a box set that sort of dips in the middle, but I don't really feel like this ever dips. I think this is kind of a slope up and to better and better and better as it goes.
Oh, and what's nice about this box set too is that there isn't necessarily an overarching story other than the War Doctor's progression.
Right.
It's kind of 3 standalone stories, which is kind of a nice, refreshing change of pace considering all of the Time War stuff we've listened to recently.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
They all say, who is Doctor Who?
Do you collect Doctor Who? Do you have Doctor Who items and you don't know you collect Doctor Who? For all things in the Doctor Who collecting world, tune in to the Doctor Who Collectors Podcast, a Direction Point Network podcast. I am Larry Van Rosbergen, your host, and I have been collecting Doctor Who for 40 years. With popular features like collection protection and the most outrageous offer, we have a lot of fun. Available anywhere you get your podcasts. You're listening to Traveling the Vortex, a Direction Point Network podcast.
Hi, I'm Rupert Booth.
I am known as Paul Ferry.
And my name is Barry Williams.
Together, we host Time Ram.
Time Ram's a cruel mistress.
It's a random number generator.
That also.
We roll a number from 1 to 13, and that's our Doctor. Then 1 to 300 for the story, and then we ram them together.
Even if it doesn't make sense.
Cruel, I tell you.
Time Ram. Putting the wrong Doctors in the wrong stories, so you don't have to.
You're listening to Traveling the Vortex.
All right, well, Sean, what do we got coming up on the schedule?
Well, coming up next on the schedule, we step away from the Time War to review the recently released Abominable Snowmen, Patrick Troughton story that has been animated and come to the States. I cannot wait to get back into that one. Return to Det Sen. Then we come back to the Time War with The War Doctor Begins Warbringer, which is the second box set of the Young War Doctor's adventures. And then we start a little fun thing that we're calling Season 6B, and taking a look at what happens to Patrick Troughton when he comes back to the second Doctor, when he comes back to the role forcibly via the Time Lords.
To be clear, we didn't coin that phrase.
We didn't coin
Season 6B has been around.
we're calling it Season 6B because that's what it is.
Because that's what it is. Yeah, exactly. So true. And I'm looking forward to doing that because this is something we've talked about probably since the early days of this podcast. We've talked about tackling the Season 6B story arcs and how they fit in the Second Doctor's era and how they really kind of make things that happen later retroactively work. So it'll be fun to do. All right. Well, of course, you can continue to follow us on our website, travelingthevortex.com. If you get any value out of this podcast, why not consider putting some value back into it? You can do that by clicking on our Patreon link and consider supporting us there. When you become a patron of this podcast, you unlock more audios and specials by us. We've got a couple of quiz shows up there. We'll have another quiz show coming up probably in a week or so. And then we plan to have one each month. I've also got another comic review that's just polishing up, finishing now, that'll be going up soon. So we'll have another group of audios for you fresh for next month. So in order to get a hold of those, you have to be a Patreon member. So we appreciate our Patreon members, and every dollar that you give us goes right back into this podcast. None of that's kept by us. We turn it back into this so that we can continue to give you more, hopefully, quality shows in the future. Also, please consider giving us a 5-star review wherever you subscribe to this podcast. It helps bump us up in the ratings and recommendations, and make sure you join in the conversations on our listeners forum on Facebook. Anything else we need to touch on before we close this show? If not, until next time, I'm Glenn.
I'm Sean.
I'm Keith.
Cheers.
Good night, everybody.
Be seeing ya.
Thanks for listening.
You have been listening to Traveling the Vortex. Doctor Who and all of its associated programs are owned and trademarked by the BBC. No infringement is intended or implied.
Direction point! Direction point!
A Doctor Who podcast network.